welcome back, everyone, and welcome to the annual Folke Bernadotte Memorial Conversation with our special guest, the Special Representative of the Secretary General, Bintou Keita. This is our annual keynote address. We have an hour, and what I'd like to do over the next hour is first just briefly explain the background for this annual lecture, and then I'll introduce our key speaker. Then I will have a conversation with Madam Keita, and we'll talk about the challenges her mission faces. And then finally, what I'd like to do is still open it up for Q&A. So there's quite a lot to do in 1 hour, but I wanted first to provide some background for why we commemorate Count Folke Bernadotte. Some of you will likely know the story, but not everyone will. The first UN peacekeeping mission was established on 29 May 1948, and that's when the Security Council authorized the deployment of UN military observers to monitor the armistice agreement between Israel and its Arab neighbors. Now, at the time, Count Folke Bernadotte had been head of the Swedish Red Cross during the Second World War, and he was chosen to be the UN's mediator. Unfortunately, in September 1948, just a few months later, just before he was about to present his plan for a political proposal to address the Palestine question, before he was presenting it to the UN, he was assassinated. Now, fast forward to 2003, the UN General Assembly decided to mark 29 May, this Saturday, as the International Day of UN Peacekeepers. And the next year, the Westminster UN Association proposed to RUSI that we mark this event together with the conference and the wreath-laying ceremony at the cenotaph. Count Bernadotte's family has agreed that to name this lecture after him. And the first Bernadotte lecture was given by his biographer, Professor Sune Persson of the University of Gothenburg. Since that time, a member of the Bernadotte family has led the wreath-laying ceremony, and now this is the largest event worldwide to mark the UN anniversary. As we've discussed, we were unable to do this together today as normal, but we will be showing you a video of the ceremony, which was filmed last Friday, just after the Bernadotte Memorial Lecture. So that's the background to the name of this lecture. And now it's a great pleasure to introduce Madam Bintou Keita of Guinea. She is the Special Representative of the Secretary General for the UN mission, Special Representative of the Secretary General in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I will say DRC going forward, and I will say SRSG for Special Representative of the Secretary General. And she's also the head of the UN Organization's Stabilization Mission in the DRC. And that term has a history behind it, why we now use that, but we can get to that later. She has been in this position, she's been in this position since, let me start over. She brings to her position more than 30 years of experience in peace, security, development, humanitarian, and human rights, and she has worked in conflict and post-conflict environments. Previously, she has served as Assistant Secretary General for Africa in the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and the Department of Peace Operations, and she has served as the Assistant Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations for several years. She has also served as a Deputy Joint SRSG for the African Union United Nations hybrid operation in Darfur called UNAMID, for those of you who recall that mission. And she led UN efforts to fight the Ebola crisis in Sierra Leone, as well as served in the UN mission in Burundi. She's also worked for UNICEF in Chad, the Republic of Congo, Madagascar, Cape Verde, Rwanda, Burundi, and at headquarters. So I'm sure you will agree she comes to her current position with a wealth of experience and expertise, and we're honored to have her with us today. So Madam Keita, welcome. Welcome today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karin, for this very, very loaded introduction, but pleasure to be with you, and thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you. And what I'd like to do is actually let me actually start by extending our deepest sympathies and support for the people of DRC and Goma after the recent eruption of Mount Nyiragongo. And I know it's devastated so many lives and livelihoods. Many people, thousands of people have been left homeless. And I understand the crisis is not yet over. There's still aftershocks being felt, and buildings are still being damaged. So we're all thinking of you and your mission and the people of Goma and DRC as well. But maybe could you just start out by giving us an update about the volcano and how it's impacting your mission?
Thank you. So clearly, I'm here speaking with you, and it's in the midst of the crisis, and which illustrate also the volatility of the type of environment peacekeeping missions are deployed to. Since 22nd of May, we've been in a crisis management mode with all my team, be it in Goma, be it in Kinshasa, and also in Bukavu, because a number of our colleagues are supporting from afar. So just to say, this has been a surprise and a shock to each and everyone. So we were caught off guard, although this is known to be the most dangerous town in the world, with 2 volcanoes and a lake with what we call the potential of gas and methane in it. So since it has started, I have to say the colleagues, the staff, the population in Goma are tremendously living in some state of shock, fears, anxiety, and on top of it, it's a lot of unknowns, because a lot of people will remember 2002 when we had this huge volcanic eruption. But at the same time, a number of patterns, the aftershocks, are not similar to 2002. So expert volcanologue and others, scientific people are looking at the situation and trying to predict, but this is one of the most difficult exercises to do. So what we do is making sure that we can, at least we've decided to take more than thousands of our peacekeepers from the mission from the Goma area where we have this situation, and move them to Bukavu, to safer place. And for the population, the order was given last night, actually, by the governor, that they have to vacate red zones, which have been identified as 5 neighborhoods within Goma, to safer place in 35 or 40 kilometers far from Goma at Sake, and also some of them moving to Bukavu and or other places within DRC. And we have routes through Rwanda, and we have to say Rwanda very cooperative, and we also have colleagues in Uganda and Entebbe, and all supporting what we are doing. So right now, before I started this conversation, my deputy in Goma, Kassim Diagne, was telling me that for today, from the peacekeeping side and the United Nations with other figures, we are close to 1,000 of our international staff, national staff, and their dependents. And this is something that we have to understand, that for the national staff, they are with their families, because Goma is a non-family duty station. So more or less, this is what we have, and we have to organize the welcome at Bukavu, which means that it's, again, an overwhelming exercise for a small team to receive so many people who will be in need of accommodations and food and different items.
Well, we wish you all luck with that. And I'm sure it's actually reassuring to the people of the region to have that type of expertise nearby, at least to assist them throughout this challenge. Let's start and talk a bit about the mission. I know this mission has been underway for some time. Can you give us a bit of an update for people who are not following DRC so closely? What are the challenges that you're facing today? Just kind of maybe a little bit of an overview about what's happening in country and what the mission is trying to achieve.
So definitely the country is, if we look at it from a perspective of decades, it's at some point, decades ago, there was a lot of foreign fighters in DRC. This is no longer the case now. We have 2/3 of the country, which is growing and living as any other place in part of the continent in Africa, with what we will call the challenges of the Sustainable Development Goals. But some places, the eastern part of DRC, there is insecurity, high level of insecurity because of the presence of armed groups, and particularly one which is called ADF. And we also have what I will call the absence of the presence of the state in most of the remote locations, which is also giving space to the armed groups and others, criminal gangs to literally be occupying the territory. So our role is twofold. With the mission that we have, the mandate that we have, is to fight the armed groups with a very specific focus on protection of civilians at the same time. And we also have to strengthen institutions in terms of the security sector, like the military, the police, but also justice and correction, and also the rule of law in general. So when we look at all of this, it's the vast majority of what we do is not known because everyone is focusing on the blue helmets or the others, but actually the totality of the peacekeepers are both the military, the police, the civilians, the volunteers, national and international, and so forth and so on. So right now, what I can say is, since the passation, the transfer of power between the former President Kabila and President Tshisekedi, it seems that we have a window of opportunity to move in the implementation of the reforms that will matter for the population. And in regard to that, our role and looking at the new government which has been put in place very recently, actually, on 26th of April, so it's quite new. We have a program of action which has been endorsed by the National Assembly and the Senate the same day, 26th April. And the priorities of the government are precisely the ones that we have in our mandate, which is let's work and give high priority to fighting insecurity in the eastern part of DRC. And in order to do this, there is the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, looking at the community part of it, and as individual, but community, and looking at stabilization. Because it's one thing to get individual, to get money, etc., but you have to organize livelihoods, and this will only come if there is a stabilization part into it. And right now, I'm happy to report that when I met with the Minister of Defense, clearly the ordinance which is going to be the kickstart of the implementation of the DDRCS, so to put it this way, is going to be signed in few days, we hope. But the UN, the United Nations in DRC is ready to support, has pledged support. And so the mission that we have is going to work through the DDR with the experts that we have inside, but also support the fight against the armed group and continue to protect the civilians. And I should have added earlier that while we are having the volcano eruption and everything going on in terms of emergency due to natural disaster, the ADF and the armed groups and the Mai Mai, they are still continuing to do their attacks. So we have to concomitantly work on the emergency and also continue to deliver our mandate in a context of COVID-19 and in a context of a heightened level of the food insecurity, humanitarian needs that have grown, etc., etc. So I'm just trying to give you a flavor because I cannot develop everything. But it is important just to remember that complexity, volatility, unknowns, are pretty much part of the picture of what we are dealing with. But we do sense that we have an opportunity to move differently in the coming months, now that we have a government in place. I've engaged several times with the Prime Minister since before even the government was endorsed by the National Assembly. And even yesterday, I met with him on the Goma situation, and I can see that there is a real willingness to do the needful to support the population. So this for us is an opportunity. And just to let you know, more than 8 members of the government are presently in Goma to deal with the situation, and the Prime Minister himself is coordinating.
Well, that's excellent, because they need to show presence, don't they? Now, I wanted to ask a little bit more about the UN's relationship, your relationship with the government. And you did mention, obviously it's a new government, you're just starting out with them, but I guess one of the challenges in many of these missions is sometimes the government's part of the problem, sometimes it's weak, and as you say, in this particular case, it can't extend its writ throughout the country. There are places where it doesn't have the presence that it needs to have. So can you tell us a bit more, maybe a little bit more details about your plans to help the government extend its influence, deliver services, those kinds of things? I guess obviously this is going to be an incredible distraction, the volcano, but it could also be an opportunity, as you say, if that many government officials are there right now, that they can really start to understand the needs and maybe rebuild when the situation calms down.
Yeah, I think it's twofold, because clearly, as I said, there is a very good opportunity and openness from the president to the prime minister to the ministers. And I met the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Interior, the Minister of Rural Development, and all of them are really willing to partner and to collaborate with the United Nations and within the United Nations family with the mission MONUSCO. So which is important because they also know what type of expertise and resources they can draw from the United Nations presence in DRC, and particularly with regard to the eastern part, where it's MONUSCO who has the larger presence through the peacekeepers. And again, as I said, when I say peacekeepers, don't just look at the blue helmets. It's also the civilians and other components that we have. So in relation to what is our plan is really to help them to extend the presence of the police. So we have our own colleagues who are working with the Police Nationale Congolaise in order for them to do the needful with regard to where the population is located. And it's done through capacity building, training. It's also at times through logistics and equipment, which is the primary responsibility of the authorities, but they don't have the totality of the resource. So we help, but we are not the only one. Donors also, bilaterals are also helping Police Nationale Congolaise. They have an action plan for 5 years. So there is a framework for the support to be provided. And for the Army, FRDC, Force Armée Défense RDC, clearly, we have a mandate to support because we have the security sector reform, which is part of our mandate. And that it has not advanced so much as we would have expected, but somehow we have a new window of opportunity to open up, because clearly, in order to control the territories, the borders, and some of the what I will call the illegal exploitation of natural resources, you need both a strong army and a strong police, and particularly some of the aspect of mining, policing around the mining. So this is one thing. And we also need to, we are helping with the justice sector, particularly the military justice, because this is the easiest one. So somehow we have to find a balance, trying to bring up the civilian justice, because for now it's essentially the military one, which is functioning, which is a bit strange, but they are having results because of the expertise that the mission is providing to them through our justice experts. And with regard to the rule of law, particularly the prison, we also have expertise that we are providing, and we are working within 12 prisons in the context of the area of operation that the MONUSCO has. But again, when every time I'm giving all this, justice, security sector reform, and implementation of the rule of law, etc., it has to be seen as a mission in partnership, in support first of the government, and it has to be seen in partnership with the agencies, funds, and programs from the United Nations, who also are coming all together to support the extension and providing the basic services that are required for the population wherever they are.
Yes, I know it's not so simple what you're saying, because I know in past UN missions, many of them were executive missions. They were actually doing the work. And of course, that doesn't empower the government. And so, yeah, that's critically important. The mission has been around now since 1999. And I think I visited in 2005. So I guess it was early days, because I remember even back then, they kept talking about, drawing down. I know that most peacekeeping missions have these kind of ridiculous ways of extending for 6 months or a year at a time, when most people know that, the mission will last much longer than that. But I guess I wanted to ask you, given your experience over the years in a number of different peacekeeping missions, how long should missions like this mission be on the ground? Do you think that the longer they're there, they either provide some sort of crutch to the government, or do you think the contrary is, do they actually provide some sort of stability, just as just in the background stability, just in case? I mean, I'm thinking of Afghanistan right now, which of course the US is already starting to withdraw, and the Taliban are growing in strength, and many Afghan officials and army officials are just turning over to the Taliban. So, in some senses, people worry that countries can be too dependent on these missions. On the other hand, maybe if it provides some sort of stability, some sort of presence is actually a good thing, however long that it takes. I guess I just wanted to get your view on it for DRC, but other places as well, given your background.
It's a bit controversial, what I'm going to say, because clearly, if we have a vision of the end goal, end state, the end state is to remove the crutch, because you use that word, so I'm giving it back, in the sense that, yes, at the time of the deployment of the peacekeeping mission, it's really in very volatile, dangerous, and a situation where there is emergency. Over time, the nature of the relationship and the understanding of the purpose is a bit lost in translation somehow. And it's lost in translation because people would not remember how hot it was, how dangerous it was decades ago. So in other words, the peacekeeping missions are really helping for the stabilization. Mm-hmm. But once this is done in most part of the country, and this is the case for DRC, and you have one part where you have still to have a peacekeeping approach to the response of the situation and the circumstances on the ground, now people see, maybe this has remained too long, and they forget that the need is still there for a purpose. And so we have to differentiate. Every time we are talking about, a peacekeeping mission has stayed too long in a place, mm-hmm. is to remember where it started, where the country is, because there is clearly evolution. And from the evolution to say, now maybe what needs to happen is a customization and a tailoring of the residual risk, dangers, threats, which have to be catered in a certain way. And we also have to think that from a place where everyone was king and queens in a place, to a place where the state has established itself and starting functioning. So we can no longer say, oh, as you said at the beginning, you are there and you are taking charge of everything. No, because the idea is you will be able to draw down if effectively the state, the government, national, and also at the provincial and local level are able to be in charge. And most of the time they are, but we have to shift the gears in terms of how the evolution is. And if it's going in the right direction, and I have to say for me, the direction of travel for DRC is right. Is now they have had their election. They are going for a next election in 2023. Mm-hmm. So somehow, and civil society organizations are vibrant, and you have also a number of partnership going on, including with the international financial institution. So I believe one has to be careful in the narrative that there are residual risk in the drawdown, and I will say we are withdrawing from Kasai in few days because 30th of June we are withdrawing, and it doesn't mean that we are going to stop working there because we have our agencies from that program who are going to continue, and ourselves we will have more than I think 10 colleagues from the mission in the justice sector and within the human rights who are going to stay there to continue monitoring and reporting, and they will be supported still by the mission. So, and Tanganyika, we are going to withdraw next year, June, if everything goes well. But we already know today that even if we have to withdraw from Tanganyika in June 2022, there are still pockets there, Nyunzu in particular, and some other place where we will still need a model of peacekeeping rather than peace building.
Yeah.
So those are, and for the Ituri and the two Kivus, clearly we are not yet at a place where we can say we are just going for peace building. But at the same time, it's important to start peace building activities in places where we mostly have the communities and there is no such threat from armed groups, be it foreigners armed groups or communities type of local defense and militias in there.
Mm-hmm. No, that's excellent. It's a more bespoke, tailored approach rather than looking at the country as a whole, because obviously it's such an enormous country and challenges and so many borders and so many neighbors, not all of which are stable. So obviously you do need to think about it at the regional and local level. That makes a lot of sense. Can I now shift to, I think, unfortunately, when people think of the mission in DRC, many people think about sexual exploitation by peacekeepers, which obviously was, in the news over the last decade or so. I know the UN has made a number of enormous effort to train soldiers in different ways, to send soldiers home, to prosecute soldiers, etc. But maybe you can just tell us a bit more about what's happening in that space, just to catch us all up about, how the mission is doing for that particular issue.
I have to say that I looked, even before I deployed on 2nd of March, I arrived on 2nd of March in Kinshasa, I look at the data. And for me, looking at the data, I'm kind of happily surprised that somehow there is a decline in the number of cases that are coming up. Now, it's also important for me to say that what I've seen here very strongly is that we have community complaint mechanism elements that are bringing forth the information, and they are going to our conduct and discipline unit within the mission. We also have in place what is important. We have support to the victims of SCA, which is very good, because when I say very good, in the sense that before there was nothing. Now you have support mechanism through projects to the victims. And it is a partnership between headquarters and the mission, and also the agency's funds and program, particularly with UNFPA and UNICEF and some others that are working on, survivors from sexual violence. So and so abusers also is part of that. The other element that I've seen is that some of the contingent, when cases are reported to them, are now becoming more serious in terms of their commitment and engagement to look at the situation, to follow up on the cases, including the paternity cases with DNA, etc. And all of this, I have to say, is a tremendous amount of work from New York and within the mission. And now it's also important to say, in the context of DRC, if it was known before to say it's only the peacekeepers and everyone else is a saint, I think there is a realization now with the latest development that, including in the humanitarian sphere and area, well, abusers, sexual abusers and exploitation are happening as well. And currently, I have to say, with my colleague, who is the Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General, David McLacankar, he has spoken very clearly about the policy, what we do, what we tolerate, and what we don't tolerate. I was in Goma from 10 to 14 this month. The reason why I went there, because I wanted to give to the sector commanders and with the support of the acting force commander, key message to the sector commanders, and including the head of office, because I had them separate. And I said, I want 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, and 0 cases from now moving forward. Is that means that we will not catch anything? No, but there is a very clear determination that this is something which is not acceptable at all, and this is also damaging the reputation of the peacekeeping. And I don't think that the blue flag deserves to be tainted with such elements. And now we definitely looking at increased trainings, awareness, sensitization, and making sure one case we are going after the chain of command and making sure that everyone will understand. And clearly I said, I'm going to descend in the place where the sector commander would not have clearly ensured discipline and knowing from midnight to midnight where the men and the women are in the contingent. Okay, and again, I don't want to give the impression it's only the uniformed people, because it's also happening in the civilian component of the mission. So it's something which I think the Secretary General has been very clear, and we are following it and we are taking it very seriously.
Yeah, though you need a zero tolerance message that's good, that's loud and clear, because especially as we also know that the militias are also raping women and girls, and so if the people who are supposed to be protecting the local population, or at least supporting, are not, understanding or are actually contributing to that challenge, obviously it's not going to help the mission at all. And it, as you say, it undermines everything. And of course, women and girls are often the victims in almost any conflict. And so everyone needs to do everything they can. So it's great that you're reinforcing that message so strongly. I don't think it'll be eradicated overnight, unfortunately. I think this is a long story, but everyone has to do their best and really send strong messages that it's completely unacceptable. Maybe we can then shift a bit to the issue for, at least for the UK. I know there's a preference for peacekeeping support to include training of others to deploy on missions, whether it's African Union soldiers or DRC soldiers. Do you think that is a good shift in focus by contributing TCC's troop contributing countries and financial supporters for the mission? Do you think that's what the mission needs now? Is it's more like capacity building rather than sending their own soldiers? I know there are some British soldiers out there, but just as an example, because obviously we know that there aren't that many Northern soldiers in any peacekeeping missions.
Yeah, no, true. And definitely, again, I don't want to start any controversy here. Just to say that training is critical, and it's critical not just for the individuals, because the more people are trained and having this ethical and what I would call the deontological approach to going to the service of peace, is about impeccability, is about professionalism, and it's about being also in empathy and compassion with the local population that they are coming to serve. So the quality of the training, for me, is, you cannot overstate it. It's very important. So what UK is doing with the pre-deployment training, I think is key. Now, there are types of trainings which I believe would be even more important, which have to do with the jungle type of training, particularly when we are talking about the Eastern DRC, where this is the type of training that will be required even more. Because the infantry type of training is good, but given the type of asymmetric threats that we are having now, more and more, and this is the context of the Eastern DRC, we need additional type of way to provide capacity and confidence in the people who are deployed. So I think it's a good it's a good way, it's a good entry point. Is it enough? I would say probably not, because I would say it's important also to look at the equipment that are going to be provided for the troops to be really operational on the ground. They are able to be nimble, and all of these assets and equipment should be part, in my view, of the package. So training, fundamental, but not enough, in my view.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm just going to ask you two more questions, and then I'll take some questions from the participants. So keep sending your questions in. The first is about UN Security Council Resolution 2250 on youth, peace, and security, and the need to involve youth at every level in peace and security issues. Given the youthful population in DRC, tell us a bit about how you're trying to implement that resolution.
Clearly, whenever I am in the field, and for me, going to the field, coming back to the capital, and back and forth is absolutely important, because we have to connect with the communities, not just the government officials, the provincial officials, authorities. It's really about also getting into the civil society organization, and in the civil society organization, connecting with both the women groups, and some of them are young people too, and the young people, both boys and girls, and adolescent boys and adolescent girls, and young people in that sense. And the reason why it is important, you said it, because of the demographic that we have in the country, but actually on the continent, in the continent. So the way I do it, when I meet with the young people, I'm always on the listening side to see what matters to them, how they want to engage on the questions of peace and security. Very often, they have views which has to do with how they can, within their communities, improve dialogue, inter-community dialogue, particularly because in the context of DRC, as many other places, you have this inter-community fighting over land, over disputes that are ages ago, but it's like retaliation, revenge, retaliation. So they want to engage into dialogue. They want to engage into more, much more forcefully in terms of mediation. So these are some of the things that they can do. And also they want to connect to other young people with regard to promoting culture of peace. And that for me is clearly important, because culture of peace, we can do it from the top, but it will have a better chance to be durable if it's done at the community level, and it's done by the very people who are the key for today and the key for tomorrow. Even though I have to say, most of the time the young people will tell me, yes, 2250 is fine, but we need to be also trusted as young people to be also at the table. And that is going to take time. So at least when I was again in Goma, 10 to 14 of May, I engaged with Ururu Knowledge Center. It's a group of young people from the Masisi zone who have decided to create their association in order to contribute to their communities through art and culture, and also empowerment of young people around livelihoods and professional training, but certainly using also dance and other things, which when we think at it as from an adult perspective, we would say, oh, these are on the side, but actually they are using all of this as integrators to bring different young people from different communities to mix and mingle. And the mixing and mingling is part, for me, of trying to create a social fabric which have chance to overcome some of the differences which are still fueling conflicts, inter-community conflicts. But we will need to invest there. Invest there not on a sense of, oh, I like this particular group, so I give something, and the next year I give nothing. It will have to be an investment. And for me, investment over time through program, not project, which means at least 5 years time frame horizon.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's so much incredible energy and these young students, leaders, etc., and just a question of harnessing it in the right direction. It must be an incredible challenge with such an enormous country too. The last question I wanted to ask you, I may have something at the very end if we have time, but is about how the mission is managing in the COVID crisis. You mentioned it earlier in the context of the enormous challenges that you're facing and that the people of Congo are facing with the volcano, with the civil unrest, with long-standing political challenges, with everything else that's going on there. How is, what's happening? Are people getting vaccinated at all? Are people following any sort of social distancing rules, wearing masks? Or do you feel like you're living in a place where you don't know that there's a pandemic? Can you tell us a bit about that?
I think there is three worlds with regard to how COVID-19 impact is seen. You have what I will call the Kinshasa-centric, with the elite looking at COVID-19 from the Congolese side, and some of them wearing masks, some of them really doing nothing. And you have the international community pretty much following the instructions from WHO in terms of social distancing, wearing masks, and getting vaccinated. And you have the majority of the population. There is no way they can social distance. It's just so crowded in the market, in the street, in the buses, the few buses that exist, the taxi. You don't see all the motos. You have 3 people on a motorbike. You have, I don't know how many people in a bus. There is no way social distancing can happen. And yet I'm always wakening every morning and say, is this a miracle, or there is something that we don't know about COVID-19? Because truly, if something was happening, it's going to be very, very, very catastrophic. but this we see nothing. And we cannot say it's not happening because there is not enough testing to be able to say that. In the international community and now within the UN, we have started the vaccination with AstraZeneca. For some of our uniformed personnel, we can see that there is an appetite to get vaccinated. There are some who have preferences for some other type of vaccine. We respect that, but we have difficulty having civilians from the our national staff to get vaccinated because of the controversy around AstraZeneca. And this is unfortunate because this is what I call the sometimes debate within the scientific community is not helping at all. With regard to the United Nations vaccination campaign, we have now more than 5,000 people who have been vaccinated. We are trading a fine line between, because we know that it is voluntary, it is also a protection. So we are trying to encourage, but how many are we going to encourage within the controversy of AstraZeneca? We don't know. And as I said, is it a miracle that we don't have more that we see? I can't say.
Well, how many Congolese have been vaccinated? Is it just the health workers, or is it not even that far?
Okay, so the 1.7 million of doses came into DRC, AstraZeneca, and 1.3 has been returned to 6 other countries because there was no appetite, and the vaccine would have expired sometime in July. So 400,000 doses were remained in DRC with the primary targets, as you mentioned, health workers, etc. So far, I don't have the figure as of today, but I know that even with that, it's still a struggle to get people vaccinated.
Okay, well, just yet another challenge. I know many countries there's a lot of nervousness about it, but none of us are safe until we're all vaccinated, as we know. Well, let me take a few questions. I'm sorry I've been dominating the conversation, but it's been a lot of fun hearing your views on all these challenges that you're facing. I mean, it's been fascinating. I wouldn't say fun. It's been fascinating and illuminating. But let me see. I have a question from Fred Carver, who asks a bit more about the people-centered peacekeeping. How can you ensure MONUSCO works in the interests of local communities? You have all these mechanisms. He lists CLA, LPC, CAN, etc. How did these work to ensure two-way communication between the mission and the population? I think we touched on it a bit earlier, but is there anything else you wanted to add in particular about these mechanisms?
So a lot of these tools are as powerful as there is an understanding that we have to be within the communities. So this is why the community liaison assistant, the community alert networks who are providing the early warning, all of this is good. And I can say that we are improving over years of the degree of response to alerts coming from the communities. I think now we are around 64, 70%. This is the last I checked, so maybe it's even more for now. But the thing is, in order to be people-centered, you also have to get the communication which is going on and the understanding of the local culture. And that, for me, is something which overall, I believe, has to be transformed in the way we engage with the communities. They are not just subjects.
Yeah.
They are agents. And that mindset, for me, to be people-centered is really to look at each and every one as not as a parent-child relationship, but as really engaging with adults. They have their knowledge, they have their coping mechanism, and they can also contribute to their own protection, provided that we trust and we are humble enough to work with them through the path that is going to be durable for them, not the templates that we have from elsewhere and we try to push on them.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I think I mentioned to you when we spoke before, when I first visited my first peacekeeping mission, I visited, my dog, sorry, was Haiti in the mid-90s when Ambassador Brahimi was the SRSG. And one thing, the message that just filtered down, I was so impressed by him, through, soldiers on the street, NGO workers, everyone would repeat the mantra that the SRSG expects us to respect the dignity of the Haitian people. And it's so important because you're right, people often kind of come with a different attitude and don't treat the local population as equals, even because they don't have as much, because they're in such dire situation. And it just it happens in so many ways. So it's incredibly important to make sure that everyone is reminded of that. So that's great. So now we have a question from Marie Njeka, who wants to know, really, after 20 years in the DRC, in terms of neutralizing the armed groups, especially in the eastern part of the country, what kind of progress have we made? It's still a challenge. I know these things aren't, even 20 years is not a long time in some places, but do you think, if you look at the trajectory over that period, do you feel that there have been ups and downs, or is it going in the right direction?
Clearly, ups and downs. I think this will be the best to describe for the Eastern DRC part, again. The only thing I can say is there is a realization that military solutions only to go after the armed group is not going to be sufficient. It's part of the package, but it cannot be only that. So we have to work on the other part, which is political dialogue, justice, fight against impunity, rule of law, and livelihoods, improving livelihoods, and removing the incentive to go and fight and kill each other somehow. So which for me really means that we should not look at the mission as the only actor. We really have to strive as the international community to scale up the sustainable development goals in the country, and particularly in the eastern part of DRC. So this is going to be the ensemble, the togetherness, which will provide a foundation for something to shift differently, while we, with the 4th Intervention Brigade, which in our mandate has to go after the armed group, and particularly ADF, is that between now and this summer, we will be ready with, as I was saying before, training is fine, but we need a type of quick reaction forces, and we have now 4 that are coming to support the 4th Intervention Brigade, which I think is good, because once we are stuck at some place in protecting civilians and hot fires are going somewhere else, we need to be able to go and move. And that is only provided if we have the nimbility, the flexibility, and everything. So I think with all of this, and also the willingness now from the national authority to prioritize fight against insecurity in Eastern DRC, and also the regional discussion with the special envoy of the Great Lakes, we may have a chance, if political will is there, from within, from the neighbors, and the region as a large, and also the international community, and also from the international community looking at the fueling of the insecurity based on the illegal exploitation of the natural resources. It's one thing to say, oh, it's all the responsibility of DRC, but it's another way to say, look at the chain, and the chain is not just DRC and the neighbors. It's go much further.
Right, of course. I mean, every place has all these elements, international partners, people coming in for investments. These places are certainly not isolated, so it can't just be up to the locals. And as you say, you need a mix of hard and soft power tools, because you can't defeat these organizations just by military means, as we know from so much work in Iraq and Syria and other places. So another question about the sexual exploitation from Sabrina White. I guess she's quite worried that if there's decreased, let's see, she says, how reliable is the reduction in allegations? In other words, if people don't think that their allegation is going to be addressed properly, maybe they don't report what has happened to them. So is there...
It's true, you know, there is two things that are happening at the same time. When you have an increased number of reporting, it doesn't mean that there is more cases. It just means that people are confident in the system and reporting. And most of the cases that I know from this place are like 20 years back, and they are coming now. So which means that for me, I'm confident that more and more collectively, the mission with the support from headquarters and also the agencies fund and program coming to the realization that we have to work collaboratively to create a sense of hope that when something is being reported, it's being taken seriously, it's being investigated, and whatever can be done, and this is where we will need the member states of the various member states, because as you know, we don't have a prosecution capacity. It has to be done within the member states. So, and unfortunately, we've seen examples where the member states are good at telling us that we have to go for zero tolerance, and if someone is caught, it's going to be all the way to the sanction. And when it comes to the member states, then it says, okay, so we do nothing. That for me is a combination of collective responsibility. We have to do our part, and I'm conscious of it. It's in country, and it's also within the member states when cases are reported. And the investigation is proven to be true.
Yeah, no, very good point. Well, I know we're running out of time, and you've been very generous with your time when you have so many other demands on your time in the mission. Let me just ask you the last question. As we are commemorating Peacekeepers today, and we will be showing the video of the wreath-laying ceremony next. And we are aware that peacekeepers are still being called on to make that ultimate sacrifice. I think in MONUSCO, you've lost over, with your predecessor or previous missions, you've lost over 370 peacekeepers have been killed, something like that. And so I guess, you know, as we're marking International Peacekeepers Day, can you tell us how your thoughts and how you reflect on this ultimate sacrifice in a way, and you know, we still have so many people who want to work in missions, are still motivated by the UN, they still believe in promoting peace. So just maybe reflect a little bit about your thoughts on this as we're about to commemorate those who have sacrificed their life in so many different places in the search of peace, the pursuit of peace.
Well, you know, it's very a sober moment for me because very recently on 10th of May, so this month, we lost Private Shitengi Kamanga. She was a member of the Malawan Battalion of the 4th Intervention Brigade, a female peacekeeper, very young. And when I came back from Goma to Kinshasa, her remains were in the flight to be able to go further. So it's not something which is, and I have goosebumps, it's really something which is deep. And my previous experience and exposure was I was just starting as the Assistant Secretary General for Office of Operation, meaning for all the peacekeeping operation. And this was December 2017. Semuliki happened, and we lost 15 peacekeepers from the Tanzanian peacekeepers, and 40, I believe, were injured. So this was my starting in New York. So it's really vivid to me, and I would remember vividly the Secretary General looking at the situation because we were showing images. I was there because the Undersecretary General Jean-Pierre Lacroix was not in the room, and I was standing for him. the Secretary General become really going inside and saying, this is not possible. And this is what has triggered the report he has tasked to General Santos Cruz to do in order to reduce the fatalities and the casualties among peacekeepers. Mm-hmm. And that is something which is very much in the heart of what we do. We have to go wherever the mission is bringing us. At the same time, there is a deep sense that we have to be also mindful of the protection of the peacekeepers. And actually what we are doing today in Goma, coming back to Goma, is to remove the colleagues and staff and personnel who can work elsewhere while waiting for the critical staff also to be ready if we have to extract them. Because this is part of our duty of care and obligation to do our utmost for people not to go back to their families. And I'm thinking of them every single time in a cascade. This is horrible, just horrible.
Yeah, well,
so the ultimate sacrifice is really something we have to honor. And I have to say, I also have to honor today Sergeant Major Wayudi Rama, who was lost his life in the Call of Duty, 21st June 20.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Very moving words, and it's important that we do commemorate those who have made the sacrifice every year. Madam Keita, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your leadership. You're an inspiration to so many of us. So we really appreciate your time with us today. We're about to show the video, but we do hope we can bring you back to speak with us in the future. And maybe after you've been in the mission for a couple of years, you can do some more reflecting with us and we can talk about more lessons learned. But on behalf of RUSI and on behalf of our colleagues, the UN Association colleagues, I want to thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think I will wait to see the video and I will leave afterwards.
Okay, great. Thank you.